think I want to complete that one real quick. It helps. It's the same for Carly too. Are you guys okay with that? A little value debate. Here we go. So we already learned reason one why value debate is super confusing and frustrating. I must explain to you a couple more reasons. And this should make value debate really clear in everybody's minds. There are three meanings of the word value at play in the phrase value debate. And you don't know which one you, your opponent, or your judge are using most of the time. It's a problem. Help me with some of the meanings. What does value refer to in value?
You're valuing something, an ideal, you treasure it, you like it, you try to get it.
And where does it come from?
To value something, the verb.
The value itself. No, the thing that you're valuing is something. Where does it come from?
It's usually a universal concept.
Who gets it into the round and how?
Whichever team presents either the affirmative or the negative presents it in their case.
Okay, so we have values in a case. Next.
The first word that comes to mind is weight. It's values not placing weight on one ideal or another.
So, do we call it value debate because we're placing weight on one idea or another?
When in conflict, you aren't necessarily placing weight on one or the other.
When you say one or the other, to what are you referring?
Would you refer to that?
Yeah, how do you know which one and which other?
It just depends on which one the resolution is talking about.
Boom. There are two values in the resolution. Oops. Third, this one's sneaky. Do you think that somebody sat in a corner and said, I'm going to dream up a debate league, and we're going to have a formative debate called value debate, where it's more philosophical and stuff? Do you think that's where value debate came from? What do you think probably happened instead? How did value debate come to be?
The debate between Lincoln or Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas.
Interesting. No, that's how the LD formed. I've debated a lot of LD policy. I coached LD policy national champion in college. I've done team value. Value and LD are not the same thing.
Only word that comes to mind is moral, which is you follow that line.
So we make a lot of deductions by assumption, mostly by parents in debate, that, oh, they use values in their cases, so that must be what value debate is. There are two named values in resolutions. That's closer. There's a phrase in a resolution called ought to be valued over that makes it value debate. But what happens, because this form is lost and you don't know the etymology of it, sometimes they change that phrase. The phrase that makes it value debate sometimes is changed. Other words that we use for that, or other phrases that we use for that.
Prioritize.
More important than comes before. So really going to go here, the second meaning. A value debate has the function in propositional logic of naming two things and creating a comparison or a contrast. The phrase ought to be valued over, or any equivalent, is why it's called value debate. Arguably, though, you can say value debate is about the two named values of the resolution, comparing and contrasting two valuable things. What did not create value debate Was someone saying, and I think when people do this, they should have values in their cases. That's nonsensical. That's saying I will arbitrarily dictate the format of proof required to prove a propositional logical statement. Propositional logic dictates how to prove that statement. You don't need an arbitrary decision about the types of arguments you should or shouldn't use. It just so happens that to prove that sort of statement true or false, you need an outside value to resolve the differences between them. Because it's more like this question is like this question. 26 over 149 versus, I don't know, 2,444 over 11,211. Do you all intuitively know exactly which of those two equations is bigger? Which one's bigger? Is it? How'd you prove it?
You divide.
By?
You do however so from either you divide the top number by the bottom number or you simplify it.
8th grade math, guys.
Well, you divide 26 by 149, and you divide 2,444 by...
How do you balance equations? With unlike denominators.
You times 26 by 149. Or you times 244 by...
Provide a common denominator. Or you can do hard stuff. Am I feel like I'm on a different planet today. I'm not sure. Okay, so you provide a common denominator. In debate, we would call this a weighing mechanism. It's how you determine when two things that you think maybe one is bigger than the other, but you're not 100% sure. It's how you resolve it. Well, if you look at needs of the public and private property rights through a lens of liberty. If liberty is the common denominator between these two, needs of the public or private property, which is more valuable?
Private property.
Let's look at it for national security. If you look at needs of the public through private property through the common denominator of national security, which one's more valuable? Needs of the public. That's all that's going on here. That's what a value does. That you call it a value is what makes it eminently confusing. Because multiple. And so you end up with, here's how judges' orientation goes. Judge orientation from someone who understands values debate. There's a resolution that creates the debate that compares two things. The debaters are going to try to prove that one is more important than the other. That's a good orientation. Not good. That is correct. Here's what happens 50% of the time to someone who doesn't understand value debate. And now, the debaters are each going to present a value, and they're going to compare whose value is more important. That is absolute garbage, but it is told to judges 50% of the time. They think the debate is about the values proposed in your case. Whose is bigger? Mine's liberty. Mine's justice. Which is big? That's not the debate. But many times it's treated as the debate because everyone's confused. They don't realize that the value is just working as a common denominator. I like to use the word test. The value is operating as a test of the resolution. Here's the test. Let's see how these two things measure against the test. Needs of the public versus the test. Fails the test. Private property versus the test. A+. Private property is better. More precisely, private property is more valuable by this test. That's the outcome of a value debate. Which of the two words in the resolution are more valuable? And you use a weighing mechanism, test, objective criterion, or value to help resolve the equation. Any questions about that?
So in a debate round, you have
have the two different values, how do you say, because the one value supports one side, the other value supports the other side, how do you make your value the common denominator for both sides?
Beautiful question. Intuitively, what's your answer? Stop choosing values that so obviously exclude and demonize your opponent's side, because it's unreasonable. Are needs of the public good? Private property good? Too often, the debaters are choosing values that don't have any common ground. You can't persuade anybody if you don't have some common ground with them. Different lesson for a different day. I think you should choose values that you can use on both sides. So when we do value creation in my club, we don't look at preparing an AF value and a neg value. We look at preparing 3 or 4 values we think are good ways to look at the resolution. Because then we're far more likely to actually use the value proposed by the team in the round. And if we do that, you know what kind of debate we'll have? We'll have one about private property and needs of the public. Interesting. If we don't do that, what kind of debate do we have? One about liberty versus justice, or liberty versus national security. Nobody came to a needs of the public debate versus private property debate expecting to hear which is bigger, national security or liberty. They came expecting to hear about Kilo versus City of New London. They came expecting to hear about all kinds of really interesting facts that the debaters have researched. But the debaters don't research because instead they're consumed with trying to find the bigger value that auto-wins for their side, which is debating technically rather than substantially. You're trying to define your way to success. Last year, the in Kafka resolution had something to do with like privacy versus national security. And there were all these debaters who defined national security as the times when a nation is secure. Which means they literally would say national security is perfect. Any time that national security leads to some abuse, like spying on you, that's not true national security. And so they defined the resolution as follows. X equals perfect, Y equals not perfect. So of course X is greater than Y. But it's almost like they said this. X plus Y is greater than 1. This is what many value debaters do with their definitions and their values. Well, you get a lot of the other, but you start with mine. So on my side, you get both. And on their side, you get neither. Am I wrong? I'm not wrong. That's sad. Because it's not debatable. There is no area of true controversy on the needs of the public, private property, when we propositionalize the resolution to be auto-win for our side. We avoid the debate from happening. Yes?
If you go against someone who has a value that you can't prove on your own side, it's kind of completely impossible, would you bring up and say to the judge, like, the value they provide actually isn't, not really fair enough? And what I say
Response 1, non-debatable or skewed. Yep, that is your first response to reject their value and propose a counter value, which is not skewed. Your counter value is not going to be just as skewed as theirs from the other direction. You're going to propose a reasonable one. Yep. Yes?
So for LD debate, the vast majority of rounds should have the same value if it's done properly?
Yes. So the vast majority of negative LD speakers should try to agree to their opponent's value so they can debate the facts and figures and contentions. That's interesting. It's a debate we want to see.
Well, so having been an LD for 1 year and
Yep.
the other this year, but I did notice that when I think about every single one of them, each side said, well, I have both, and the other side has neither. So then you spend the entire time just trying to say, no, my side has both. No,
Right.
your side doesn't have both, mine does.
Yeah, we're arguing about how to decide instead of actually making the decision.
Yeah.
Yes, it is highly problematic.
So what do you do when the judges expect value clash?
You have to very clearly call this out. And you just say, normally I would, and you don't really mean it, but you do really mean it. If they had provided a value that excluded my side, I would say, don't use that as a test of the resolution. But then go ahead and give them some words. Between the two valuable things, these are the public and private property rights. We're comparing and contrasting these two valuable things. The value they propose, in this case, the general welfare, perfectly fine way to look at this. So I am going to use as negative the value they proposed, general welfare. My thesis in this debate, though, is that general welfare, the value of the round, is best upheld by private property, not by needs of the public. Let's go look at why. So you spend a lot of time doing some teaching to help them feel, oh, okay, so they can agree to the value. And even if a judge is highly prejudiced against that, you could always set aside judge prejudice one time if you explain it well. Okay, so that is reason number 2. I'm missing one. Oh, I was going to tell you, so when somebody says you shouldn't use values in policy debate, it's because they're coming from this intuitive and assumptive perspective on what debate is, that people in a room say, in policy we should debate about concrete things, and in value debate we should debate about philosophy. Debate is about proving resolutions true and false. Categorically speaking, a policy resolution is not phrased X should be compared as greater than Y. And so it's not a value debate. Debate that's phrased X should be changed. Negative doesn't have a given position. Negative just needs to show that it shouldn't be changed. But if you're going to show something should be changed, you probably are going to talk about pros and cons. Advantages and disadvantages. So the type of argument you use flows from the type of resolution you're proving, not from some arbitrary decision by a committee. Should you ignore your beliefs when making policy? No. You can't. You can't even debate. The word good has no meaning without a value behind it. So articulating the value in a round in a policy round makes a whole load of sense. We should decide whether or not to change our federal agriculture policy on the basis of consumer information. That is a value that you should use to decide whether the status quo today or the plan that I propose is better on the value of consumer information. And then you have that auto-judge response, I don't think you should use values in policy debate, even though every policy decision I make in my entire life is based on my values, because I've intuited this assumption. So you only run into this problem with parent judges if they're poorly oriented. Yeah. So what can you do to get around that?
You call it a criteria.
You call it a criteria, but they still recognize that from LD, so you call it something completely different. Objective, goal, standard, any synonym of those. Deeper why, core principle, guiding light. Free yourself as a debater from a box of debate words. We should make our policy based on the guiding principle, consumer information. There, now it doesn't sound like I'm doing something silly. Okay, now you guys need to know, so we've done a lot of what not to do in value. How do you approach a topic like this? Any of you take 8th grade logic? By the way, one thing about learning debate in a learning environment, even though I'm intense, think of it like, have you ever played the game The New Yorker? Okay, so The New Yorker is this really cool game where you have a cartoon without a caption, and then you just go around and everybody tries to caption the cartoon, and then you choose the funniest one. Okay, simple game. But a lot of people have trouble with it. And the authors of the game recognize this so much they have a bunch of advice for how to write these. And the advice is, stop judging yourself so harshly. Of course it's really bad. Start doing a lot of captions and eventually you'll get to good ones. And it's absolutely true. So here we're not focused on being perfect. In fact, one of my best teachers ever said, when you practice, you're supposed to stink. We're working on the things that are hard, not the things that we're already good at. So don't be ashamed. All right, on we go. How do we do it? 8th grade life. There are 2 basic syllogisms everybody's supposed to learn. These are the therefore symbols. The first one is A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. The second one is given P, A leads to P, B does not lead to P, therefore
A.
we're going to adapt this for our value topic. So we've got needs of the public in private property rights, but again, this could be a parley debate, and this is what you should, everybody needs to know this case structure for your parley debates. That's why you're doing this. What do you think given P probably is? Nope. Somebody said something. Yeah, the value, given the weighing mechanism. Everybody hear me? Weighing mechanism, value, test, objective, goal standard, they're all the same thing. Weighing mechanism. Given the weighing mechanism, which you have to introduce from the sky, because needs of the public and private property rights don't give it to you. You have to take a stand and insert that into the debate round. Given the weighing mechanism, we're going to call this one X and this one Y. Contention. X gets you weighing mechanism plus 5, lots of it. Standard debate tactic, Y does not get you any weighing mechanism. But based on what we've just said, then they're going to have the debate about whether the given weight, they're going to debate on this premise. We want to have a debate not about given the weighing mechanism. We want to actually debate about needs of the public and private property rights. So what can we do as a different way on this premise here to create a substantive debate?
Why does not support it to the same extent?
Boom. Y is pretty good, but it leads to weighing mechanism only plus 3. Quantitatively. But the way you said it, I actually title in my cases, I will say when I get to this point, that and private property is less just, or whatever is the weighing mechanism. Less. Less defensive. Therefore, what logically has to follow?
So if we have in our app case, we have public duty upholds general welfare, and then your second contention would say our property rights don't uphold it as much.
Correct.
So we would
Hold it less.
uphold it less. Okay.
What follows?
X is better.
X is greater than Y. If you swap out what's given, you have to recalculate. If what's given is fair, both sides are arguing, is it plus 5, plus 3, plus 8, plus 7, plus 2? What is it? How much of the weighing mechanism? Now we're debating about needs of the public and private property rights. Hooray! Good stuff. Notice that this is a categorical proof. Because here's another thing that value debaters do that's frustrating. Everything good about X. Needs of the public get you this, needs of the public get you that, needs of the public get you this other thing. The end. To which Isaiah, when he's debating his students, says, your case isn't prima facie. You don't even have a case for the resolution. Because the resolution isn't needs of the public are good. The resolution is needs of the public are more important than private property rights, and if at no point in your case do you actually prove that these points show needs of the public are better than private property rights, you haven't proven anything. You don't have a case. I think many times the cases don't even exist. Yes?
So if we did it the way we have first definition, second definition, would you have to have a third to complete that formula, or would you just kind of say it in your conclusion?
Love where you're going.
Because if you kind of have that application, I mean, you think
So
that
how do you divide your case? how you actually structure this case. You have your weighting mechanism, the value section. This is expected to test. Don't have multiple contentions, because multiple contentions actually are weak unless they are independent justifications, but you don't have time to develop two independent justifications. So instead we have one contention, which we might call our thesis. Who here has an F weighting mechanism? That's fair. I need an example. Yeah.
Robust measure. Human welfare.
Human welfare. Point one, the test of the resolution. This is clear? Should be, not is, should be. Human welfare, you said yes? That's our point one. Point two, what is probably the name of our entire thesis?
Public needs upholds human welfare.
That's not prima facie yet.
The resolution upholds human welfare.
Public needs upholds human welfare back.
Boom. Public needs, or needs of the public needs are better through the lens of human welfare. Now you don't have to say it exactly like that, but at some point you have to say it exactly like that. You should choose needs of the public over private property rights because needs of the public are better at promoting human welfare than private property rights. Do you hear how clear of a statement that is? It's like an actual thesis that somebody could write on an actual ballot to actually vote out, having heard both sides. So then the structure of point two, our one contention, is A, that, and B, that. So it's just one point that we have, and we prove it with the necessary parts to prove a point. And now you're probably starting to see why I object to having multiple contentions. When you separate these out, they don't prove anything about the resolution. It's only once they're together that you've actually answered the complete question of the resolution. Separate them and you're only talking about halvesies. And so what you're actually proving is not a categorical statement. You're proving some of the time X and some of the time Y. But the resolution is all of the time. Yeah.
So under each subpoint, would you have 2 or 3 applications?
Yes.
Okay.
Multiple warnings. Yes.
Okay, so then would those actually be your taglines?
Yes. But then you might have a 1, 2, 3 under it, like she just said. So, given that human welfare should be the test of the resolution, I think I can prove that the public needs are more welfarist to humanity than private property rights. But my opponent has a good shot at proving inside. Let's take a quick look. Let's look at the A, needs of the public promote extensive human welfare. Point 1, medicine. Point 2, military bases. Point 3, epidemics. Now let's take a look at private property right. In point B, private property rights promote less human welfare. Point 1, always individualistic. Point 2, geographically limited. Point 3, Locke agrees with me. Quote John Locke. Conclusion, the end. Yep.
How would you, there's a lot of debaters that think that way, so introducing this year is going to be hard to do it. What's like a simple way that, to like not send your opponent to a tailspin because they have no idea what we're talking about, but just like explain it to them in a very simple way?
When you're F or neg?
Either way.
Okay, so when you're F, what I like to do is I like to give little clues about how they could debate. So I like to say, so the test that I hope both of us agree on is human welfare. I think it's fair to both sides. Here, public needs are better than private property through the lens of human welfare, but I think there's an angle for my opponent to prove otherwise and to take a look at private property. I'm going to take a look at both of them. And so you're doing it that way. Now when you're Ned, and somebody has composed a non-prima facie case, I think you teach the judge, and that will be how you teach AF. And this works really well, believe me. You say, my opponent's presented a case that is not a categorical, it has three flaws. First, it's not a categorical proof. They've proven that in some cases, needs of the public outweigh private property rights, but they haven't even attempted to answer the question. The resolution doesn't say sometimes, it says all. Second, not prima facie. Prima facie is a legal concept, meaning demand reply. My opponent has isolated needs of the public from private property rights. So we don't even need to reply yet because it's not in full proof of the resolution. Third, unjust characterization. My opponent took all of the best things about needs of the public and compared them to all the worst things about private property rights, which tends to happen in value debate a whole lot. We should compare the best with the best and the worst with the worst if we want to have any kind of fair comparison, and maybe even the middle with each other. Let's do that now. The best side of needs of the public is exactly what they said, but the worst side of needs of the public is this. The worst side of private property, I agree with everything they said about it, but the best side is this. That's kind of confusing because it means that needs of the public and private property rights are both good. I get that this is a difficult decision for you. But here's why I think the goods of private property outweigh the goods of needs of the public, where the risks of each are equal. That's a complete negative strategy. Judges, do you feel like that's sort of clear? If you were following? It's clear as all day if you can articulate it like, oh, they compared the best with the worst. You're right, that doesn't make any sense at all. But if you come around and do the same thing again, that's where the problem comes from. Then you're both just unreasonable. So I structure all my AF cases like this. Now, inside of here, you can have different arrangements of subpoints. You need to tick the boxes of this, but you don't have to do it in complete block form if you don't want to. Now let's do a quick example.